The morning started like every other morning. The sky over London was the kind of grey that never quite decided whether it wanted to rain or not. A thin layer of clouds stretched from one end of the city to the other, soft and quiet, the way the city sometimes looked before the traffic woke up and the streets filled with noise. But on this particular road, there was no noise. The road had already been checked, cleared, and quietly closed off to regular traffic without anyone nearby fully understanding why. 3 black vehicles moved together in a smooth, tight line. They did not rush. They did not need to. The road was theirs. They moved like something rehearsed 100 times, because it had been, every turn calculated, every distance between the cars kept exactly the same, every mirror angled just right. This was the Royal Motorcade, and everything about it was deliberate. Inside the middle vehicle, the leather seats were clean and cool. The windows were dark from the outside. Nobody passing on the pavement could see in, and that was exactly the point. The glass itself was not ordinary glass. It was thick, several layers of specially treated material bonded together, the kind that does not crack under pressure, does not shatter from impact, and does not let sound pass through easily. It was designed to keep everything outside. And to keep everything inside, safe. Prince George sat in the back seat. He was dressed for school. His navy blazer was neat. His collar was straight. His shoes had been polished that morning the way they always were, not because he insisted on it, but because that was simply how things were done in his world. He had a small bag beside him. His hands rested on his lap. To anyone watching from outside, he would have looked like a calm, well-dressed boy being taken somewhere important. But the people inside the car were not watching from outside. The protection officer sitting next to him in the back seat was a man who had been doing this job for years. He did not look like someone whose job was extraordinary, because the best protection officers never do. He wore a dark suit. He kept his expression calm. His eyes, however, were never still. They moved from the window to the wing mirror to the road ahead and back again, in a constant, quiet rotation that never stopped. His earpiece was small and almost invisible. He was connected at all times to the officer in the front passenger seat, to the lead car ahead, and to the vehicle trailing behind. Everything was normal. They had been on the road for about 7 minutes. The route was one they had traveled many times before. Nothing on the radio suggested anything worth paying attention to. The lead car's driver adjusted the speed slightly to maintain the right gap at a bend in the road. The officer in the trailing vehicle scanned the pavement to the left. The morning routine continued exactly as it was supposed to. And then Prince George moved. It was not a slow movement. It was not the kind of shift a bored child makes when they are fidgeting or trying to get comfortable. It was fast and sudden, the way movement looks when something inside a person demands it before their brain has fully decided what to do. He lurched forward from his seat, and his hands came up, and he brought both palms flat against the thick glass partition that separated the back of the car from the front. He hit it once. Then again. Then again and again and again, with both hands, open-palmed, the sound of it coming through the glass as a dull, muffled thud that the officer in the front could feel more than hear. The protection officer beside George reacted immediately. He turned, both hands up in a steady, careful way, not grabbing, not alarming, and leaned toward the boy. His voice was low. Whatever he said it quietly and directly, his face close, his eyes level with George's. But the boy's face told its own story. In the rearview mirror, the officer in the front passenger seat could see it clearly. The prince's face was pale, not the kind of pale that comes from being cold, but the kind that drains from a person all at once when something goes wrong inside them. His eyes were wide. His jaw was tight. There was a look in his expression that every parent, every teacher, every person who has ever been around a frightened child knows without needing to be told. Something was wrong. And it was wrong right now. The message went through the earpiece in less than 3 seconds. Principal needs an immediate stop. Pull over now. This is not a drill. The lead car slowed first. The principal vehicle followed. The trailing car came to a smooth stop behind them. The whole convoy pulled to the left side of the road near the edge of St. James's Park, the grass just visible through the iron fence, dark green and still wet from the night before. Doors opened. Officers stepped out in a practiced way, not dramatically, not with any visible alarm, just efficiently, taking their positions around the vehicles the way they had been trained to do when a scheduled stop became an unscheduled one. 2 officers stood wide, eyes outward, watching the pavement, the park entrance, the road in both directions. Another moved to the rear door of the principal vehicle and opened it without being asked. Fresh air came in. George was breathing hard. His PPO had an arm gently on his shoulder, steady and supportive. The senior officer who had opened the door crouched down at the opening, not standing over the boy, not looking down at him, but bringing himself to the same level, the way someone does when they want to make it clear that they are with you and not above you. He spoke quietly. George nodded. And then the truth of the moment settled over everyone involved, and it was not at all what the outside world might have imagined. There was no threat. There had been no sound from outside the vehicle, no warning on the radio, no sudden movement spotted by the trailing car, nothing in the intelligence briefing from that morning that had predicted anything unusual. The motorcade had not been followed. Nobody had approached the convoy. The road was clear and safe. Prince George had not panicked because of danger. He had panicked because he was not well. It had come on suddenly, the way these things do with children, quickly, with no warning, giving almost no time to think or prepare or do anything except feel it. A deep, turning, urgent feeling in his stomach that had climbed quickly and was not going to wait for the car to reach its destination. He had felt it rising and had done what any child does when they are frightened and surrounded by adults they trust. He reached out the only way he could. He reached through the only thing between him and the people in front. He hit the glass because it was there, and because he needed someone to stop, and because at that moment he was not thinking about protocol or procedure or what a future king is supposed to look like in the back of a car. He was just a boy who needed help. The senior PPO straightened up slowly. He made a small gesture with 2 fingers toward the officer by the trailing vehicle. No words needed. Within moments, a quiet radio call went out to the coordination team. The day's schedule, whatever had been planned for that morning, wherever the convoy had been headed, was rearranged without fuss. A note was made. Calls were placed. The kind of invisible adjustment that royal protection teams make dozens of times in a year, for dozens of different reasons, was made again now. One of the officers retrieved a small bag from the rear of the trailing vehicle. Standard kit. The kind of bag that travels with the convoy always, for exactly these kinds of moments, because the people who protect the royal family do not prepare only for threats. They prepare for everything. George sat at the edge of the open car door, feet resting on the running board, the morning air cool on his face. His PPO sat beside him in the open doorway, close enough to be steadying without being overwhelming. Someone had passed a bottle of water forward. The senior officer stood just a half step back, not crowding the space, not staring, just present in the easy, unbothered way that the best protection officers learn to be present, visible but not pressing, available but not hovering. A few minutes passed. The color came back into George's face, slowly, the way it always does. His breathing steadied. The wide, startled look in his eyes softened into something closer to embarrassment, the very particular embarrassment that children feel when their body has done something they could not control and too many adults were watching. He looked down at his hands. He looked at the green of the park across the road. The senior PPO said something that made him look up. Whatever it was not the sort of thing that gets written down in a report. It was the sort of thing one person says to another when they want them to know that nothing that just happened is a problem, and nothing that just happened will be spoken about in a way that makes it bigger than it was. The boy nodded again, smaller this time, calmer. Within 15 minutes of the convoy pulling to the side of the road, it was moving again. Smoothly, quietly, in the same tight formation as before. The schedule had been adjusted. The destination had changed. The radio traffic was routine. If you had been standing on the pavement near St. James's Park and happened to look up at the right moment, you might have seen 3 dark vehicles pull to the curb, idle briefly with a door or 2 open, and then pull away again. You might have thought nothing of it, or wondered briefly what it was about, and then gone back to whatever you were doing. A small number of people did notice. They always do in London. A woman walking her dog near the park entrance saw the vehicles stop and watched for a moment before the nearest officer, standing with the calm, expressionless patience of someone who does this often, met her eye in a way that was perfectly polite and perfectly clear, and she walked on. A cyclist on the far side of the road slowed for a second, saw nothing obviously remarkable, and kept riding. No photographs were taken. No social media posts went up. No one shouted anything. By the time the story made its way into conversations, and it did, because these things always do eventually, moving quietly from person to person through the channels that exist in any world where the same small group of people share long days and long memories, it had already been reduced to what it actually was. Not an incident. Not a drama. Not a failure of any kind. Just a morning that reminded everyone involved of something important. The people who guard the royal family are some of the most highly trained individuals in the world. They study routes and practice responses and think in terms of distances and angles and probabilities. They know how to move a principle through a hostile environment. They know how to communicate under pressure. They know how to make a decision in a fraction of a second that the rest of us would need minutes to reach. Their preparation is thorough and their skills are genuine, and the weight of what they carry, the responsibility for the lives of the people in their care, is not small. But every one of them will also tell you, if you ask them late in the evening when the formal language falls away, that the job is not what most people imagine it to be. It is not constant action. It is not high drama every day. Most of it is patience. Most of it is presence. Most of it is being the kind of steady, reliable, unshakable person that someone else can lean on when they need to, not because something terrible has happened, but simply because life has happened, and life does not wait for a convenient moment. Prince George would grow up. He was already growing, in all the ways that children grow when they live in the particular kind of world that he lived in, watched and prepared and guided and shaped by 1,000 different forces, all of them pointed toward the same distant future. He would learn more of the protocols. He would grow more comfortable in the motorcades, the formal rooms, the official occasions that required him to hold himself a certain way and say the right things at the right moments. He would get better, as his father had before him, at carrying the weight of a name that comes with more expectations than any child should have to understand. But he was not there yet. Not on that gray Tuesday morning. On that morning, he was a boy who felt suddenly unwell in the back of a car and did not know what else to do except reach out for the people in front of him, through the only thing between them. He was a boy whose instincts were simpler and truer than any protocol, instincts that said, without words, I need help. Please stop. I am not okay right now. And the people whose job it was to protect him stopped. Not because a threat had been identified. Not because a situation had escalated. Not because any of the training manuals had a chapter for this exact moment. They stopped because a child needed them to. Because that is what you do. Because underneath every procedure and every protocol and every layer of bulletproof glass, the job, the real job, is simply to make sure that the person in your care is all right. They made sure he was all right. The motorcade drove on. London moved around it the way London always does, indifferent and busy and enormous, paying no particular attention to 3 dark vehicles making their way through the morning. The clouds stayed gray. The park stayed green. Somewhere in the front seat, an officer's eyes continued their quiet rotation from mirror to road to mirror. And in the back, Prince George sat a little quieter than before. His blazer still neat. His collar still straight. The color back in his face. Looking out the window at the city going past, the way any boy might look out of a car window on the way somewhere, taking in the buildings and the trees and the ordinary, unremarkable, everyday world outside, in that particular way children have of looking at things, as if seeing them for the very first time.